All right, good morning, everyone. I will start out by saying that the video you are going to see today is used for training purposes only, that no real students' names or data are being portrayed in this video, that any likeness to any real student is purely coincidental, as we do use a sandbox server for training that is full of fake students and fake information. So today we are going to discuss the newest updates that have been applied to the PowerSchool attendance calculation plugin. Remember that this whole journey that we have to reconfigure attendance from top to bottom for us in Alabama from what PowerSchool has as their core attendance product. I've always said from the beginning will be done in multiple stages because we have to get part coding right and then go to the next step. So we appreciate your patience as we have to deliver this in pieces, but I do promise you that each time we make it one more step better to where we eventually want this to all end up. So in this last update, we did add some new functionality to help with the tardy situation, and we're going to talk about that from top to bottom. We corrected some bugs that was happening in the daily attendance calculation when you're running the reconciliation method, and some that would even happen natively with some of the present codes. And then we're going to talk about present codes. One of the things that the developer and myself really looked at in this one right here, we actually had to take a step and look back at, was in how to look at that overall day, because we kept on the original journey tried to look just at codes that were being entered through meeting, and we saw that there were still some discrepancies, one in the way that people were entering the codes, and two, it not meeting that 49% logic by trying to figure out which code was most used. So we took a step back and recoded everything. To start first, we added a layer in. We said, okay, first check the record to see if a check-in or check-out has occurred. In other words, minutes are actually removed from the student's overall day. When minutes are removed for the overall student's day, then we had it categorized. We said, okay, I don't care what code the person in the front office put on those meetings. If that check-in or check-out constitutes in them missing 49% or less of the day, I want to automatically trigger a tardy code, because that's our state definition. Our state definition is that they have to be there for 51%, meaning they can miss 49%. And if they miss 49% or below, then they are tardy for the overall day. It does not matter when that 49% is missed. It could be, 30 minutes at the beginning of the day and checking out 5 minutes early in the end of the day, and it combines all together to only be 15% of the day that they missed. That's still an overall tardy. But if a student goes over that amount, they go past the 49%, then we need to be looking for an absent code. So we gave that logic first. That was not in the first iteration of this. So now when you enter it in and it runs that tool, it's going to look to see if it's below 49 to look for a tardy code. And if in one of the meetings you place a tardy code in there, then it's going to use the tardy code you have placed. If, however, you have placed a absent code, because that could happen. Maybe they were only absent first period and they were absent enough of the day that it's an absence for that period, but not an absence for the day. Then it's going to use that new setting of the default tardy code. And we're going to talk about that in this setup, but I have this conversation with you first. If they go over 49%, it knows it needs to be an absent code for the overall day. At that point, it's then going to look at all of your codes that you've entered, and whatever absent code you have used the most is what it's going to throw as the daily absent code for the students. So that was a pretty major change in this, and why this iteration took so long to get uploaded in there, as we put that level of logic on there first. We still have other levels we're going to put under there, but they're going to come in the next iterations. The other thing that we had to look at was present codes, okay? Because with present codes, when it's an overall day, so think about ISS, think about legal, think about field trips, think about school activities, things like that. Minutes are not taken away from the day. So there's nothing for us to trigger on there with that type of logic. So what we had to do is say, okay, what kind of codes would we want to write to the daily side if it shows up over in that meeting side? So the first two that we go to right out of the box are going to be your ISS, and your alternative placement, the ones for discipline. For the other present codes, this is where we kind of ran into an issue. When it comes to, let's say, field trips, maybe you want to code a field trip because they were gone for one period of the day. That's not a check-in or check-out. You're just putting a present code to say they weren't in the classroom. They're still in school. You don't check them in and out of those because it takes minutes from the day, and you don't want to do that. But if you put a field trip in for one period, you don't want the overall day coded as a field trip. They're still present for the overall day. So what we had to do is leave those codes alone, because we don't want codes that are entered once or twice in a day and not through all periods to trigger over as a daily code. We wanted that daily code to stay a present. So one of the things that we're working on is, in another iteration, giving you an option where you as a district get to say and make that decision. If I enter these present codes in and it sees them in a meeting, then yes, I want it to flag over on my daily side as well, maybe because of some report you're going to run. That's going to be in a later iteration. But for now, the only present codes that you should expect to see over on the daily side as a true code other than present is going to be your discipline codes, the ISS, the AP. Now, that doesn't mean if you need that overall daily code of legal or whatever else you might choose, you can still go over on the daily side and manually manipulate that yourself. It's just right now we don't have it as part of the automatic feature. Still working toward that. But for now, you can still do that. The other big change that happened in this update was in the actual daily attendance calculation procedure, where you can run across, the whole school year or a week at a time, or just check a day to see if you have any mismatches in your meeting and daily. There were two big bugs that were in the last iteration. One of them, it was picking up a teacher tardy that had been entered and marking it as the overall tardy, and that has been corrected. So you can actually rerun the recalculation now and fix any of those that might have been in your past instance. The other thing is that it would take tardies that were like truly check-ins and check-outs and marking them as an overall present for the day when it should have left it as the tardy. So that tardy iteration was fixed inside of there. So the two of them were big fixes, and then the Easter egg, we called it, putting it in there, is we knew when you were doing a recalculation on a lot of days on all of your kids, it would become a very long list, with the majority of them being matches. And we really don't want to look at the matches because we know they're good. We just want to look at the mismatches to see what might be going on. There's a little H icon that you'll now be able to click on that will allow you to hide all of the matches, so that you can then focus on the ones that it's changing to say, okay, why is it having to change anything? What are we missing while we're doing this? So that's kind of the broad overview of everything that happened with this update. Now what I want to do is go into here and go through each of those scenarios, talking through the changes, posting some attendance so you can see this happening backwards and forwards, and then going through multiple attendance scenarios. And I'll run them at a high school, which will mimic most people's high schools and middle schools where you have multiple periods in an actual bell schedule. And then I also have this set up for the elementary school, where we run just a homeroom class all day long so that you can see it works in both ends. So I'll flip back and forth between both schools as we kind of go through and look at this adjustment. So I'm going to, and I just noticed I hadn't started sharing my screen yet, so let me get that up and going for you. Okay, y'all should be seeing my screen. If you can't, just let me know. All right, we're good. Okay, so I'm here at Alabama High School. As you will note, I'm going to go in here and show you that I do have some meeting attendance that has already been captured for today. This is some pre-populated check-ins and check-outs, not very many data pieces at all, just 5 kids who have certain periods that have been marked out for some reason. And if I go over here to the daily side, you'll also see I have a few students. What I want to do is start over in the teacher portal, same 5 kids. I want to start over in the teacher portal and just mimic that first period, take an attendance, and go through there. So I have another incognito window here, or I'm logged in as a teacher who has a whole lot of classes in here. So in this fix, you should, yes, still be able to take attendance on all of the different attendance pages inside of here. So notice that you have, I'll look through them again, the take attendance, which I would say about 75% of the entire state takes attendance on this one page right here. I call this the single day entry attendance mode for them. And I would go through and find whatever students were absent. So what codes they see, is all depending on what you have allowed them as a district. Some districts do not allow teachers to even code tardies at all. Some of them do. Some of them just default unexcused absence for them. So whatever it is that you default for them, I'm going to go in and let's say Ava is absent today. Let's mark Alexa, Axel, just throw a couple of them on there, and I'll even go in and throw in Benjamin as being tardy to class. So your basic, just go in and mark these codes inside of here. Notice again, this is for today's date. I'm going to submit. The teachers get the little spinny wheel because that's going through and doing all of that calculation for us in the background. It's going and writing to the rest of the periods of the day, and it's calculating that daily code and writing it over there on those student records as well. Now, one thing that I did want to bring up in doing this right here, how many of you in here allow your teachers to code excuses the day after a student comes back? Do we have some users in here who allow that? I will be completely honest with you, that can cause you some problems with this new rewrite. Because when it comes to the teacher portal, this rewrite only works on current day attendance. So if I were a district that did let them go in and code, and let's say I bumped this back to yesterday, and if somebody had been absent and I was allowed to go and say, oh, well, they brought a doctor's note, code it to doctor, it is not going to do the same thing that it just did when I coded today's attendance. It's not going to take that doctor's note and write it for all of the periods of that day, and it's not going to update the daily side at all. If you have attendance notes being taken, I have a video that I put out on YouTube that shows you how to enter those from the office side. You might want to have a conversation internally in your school and in your district about that, because you can have each individual teacher update the code. So if I've got 4 periods, I can update my first, second period has to update second, third has to do third, and fourth has to do fourth. And then from the office level, you could run a reconciliation and it would map that correct daily code over there for you. That's your one option. If you want teachers still to code it, you still have to run that reconciliation on the office side. Or your second option is to change that procedure and have your front office recode any absences that are day after notes. And I will tell you, and Carol just put it in chat, there's a lot of districts who a couple years ago made the swap anyway and have all excuses entered from the district office as well. I would say almost 40% of the 60% of the entire state do that. It's the more conversations we have, more people are going inside of there. When it comes to the other methods, whether I use multi-day attendance, as long as I'm taking it on this day, it's going to work. If I try to enter it on any day prior to or even after, it's not going to work. It's only going to code that period for this teacher. It's not going to code the whole day, and it's not going to rewrite anything, because we don't want a teacher overriding something that another teacher has entered on a past day. Even if you use the, I'm going to go back to the single day, you know how we can do the show multiple sections? So I don't know if you noticed on the front page of this teacher, but this teacher has 3 classes first period that they facilitate. And that's not uncommon in the state. I know, especially in high schools, you might have multiple classes built into one period. Band, you might have 3 different levels of band in one class period, so there's 3 different rosters. I know there's some CTE classes. You might have networking 1 and networking 2 scheduled together. When teachers have multiple scheduled classes stacked like that during a period, they can click this show multiple classes button, and it reconfigures this page so they see all of their rosters in one spot to take attendance. So in this case, I've got this one class here, and this might be the only one that I have on this one on a red day. Maybe my second block has a bunch. Let me go back to that one because I do think, yeah, for first period, I've only got, and there's no kids in that one. Let's do this one. If I go to my second period, and I've got one student in this class, if I show multiple sections, now do you see how up here it says, hey, you're going to take it for these 3 classes now. So now I see that I have one student in this section, I have one student in this section, and I got a whole bunch of kids in driver's ed. So teachers can post attendance for multiple sections at one time when they're all in that one period. And so if I wanted to mark some absence, so I'm going to mark that student here, this student here, this student here. So now I'm checking attendance on all 3 sections at one time. And when I hit that submit, again, that tells me my process is running. And even though I just did 3 classes at one time, it's writing that meeting to all of them and writing that daily to all of them. So it's going to work on all of those pages, including your seating chart page. So if you do have teachers who are taking attendance using the seating chart, they can mark that on here as well and submit it in, and it still writes over there. So really nothing changed on the teacher side, but I wanted to go through that one more time just so everybody understands the expectations of what should be working and what should not be working as far as when a teacher takes attendance and what it writes over. Something else to keep in mind, if in any of your teachers' classes, if you have marked that section in the scheduling setup, like in your section setup, to not be included in ADA calculations, then it will write that one code over, but it's not going to put the process on it. It's not going to use it as part of the daily, and it's not going to write it to the rest of the periods. I've had a couple of people to email and say, hey, I've got this one random teacher that when they take attendance, it does not write it to the rest of the day. Well, come to find out, it was marked to not include in ADA calculations. It was marked to exclude, so they had to go do some checking on that to make sure that that was taken care of. Same thing in periods. Make sure in your bell schedule that you don't have a period set to not be included in ADA, because that will prevent the process from working correctly as well. So on the teacher side, all should be good. And just to double check, let's go and check my meeting attendance, because I should see now a lot more entries inside of there. And sure enough, there's all those kids that I just added in. Now, you'll notice that you don't necessarily see full days on here. Well, that could very well be because they don't have a full day schedule. Maybe these kids are here 2 days and then they go to a college for 2 days and I just don't have filler classes built in. That's very much a possibility. For these students right here, these are the 3 students that I just marked in my second period class. So this would indicate to me that their first period teacher did not mark them absent, but second period did, because do y'all ever have teachers who forget to take attendance? It happens. And so we keep that in mind. This helps catch it, and we'll do that daily record correctly. If I swap over here to my daily attendance page, you'll notice I'll have my daily codes being triggered, and I have a lot more than 5 students on here. So all those students who came in with that are now there, including those that would be tardy. They would be on my tardy count. So if I go back to my meeting attendance, because I did mark a student tardy, remember that I can use all of these filters up here to look. Right now, I'm only looking at students who are absent. If I want to look at who's been marked as tardy, well, I can see that those 2, that was the one that was done previously, and then I have this one right here that is inside of there. Okay, so teacher tardy. Notice that when I was on the daily side, I did not have anyone listed with a tardy tag at the top, because this was a teacher tardy, which does not constitute a daily tardy. The daily tardy is only going to produce when you do a check-in or check-out and take minutes out of that student's day. Okay, so all of that is showing there. Now, with this new update, one of the things that did change was that preference for those tardies, and how we now look at the amount of minutes first to calculate the percentage to know, do we go to a tardy code or an absent code? For that to be placed in there, there was an attendance preference that's added inside of there so that you must set a preferred, or what I'm going to call default tardy code. So if your school has not set this preference yet, this is one thing everybody needs to lay eyes on. So in the school setup, if you're in the old UI, you're going to go to setup in school, and under attendance, you're going to go to attendance preferences. At the very bottom of this page is this daily attendance calculation settings. And y'all, I'm going to apologize ahead of time for this cough that I have had almost 2 months from COVID. Y'all will be proud of me though. I did go to the doctor yesterday and I have had a steroid shot, a steroid pack, a Z pack, and some cough medicine to try to knock this thing out now. But this right here, you should have this enabled because hopefully we're all using this by now because it's making your life easier. Just have to learn it. This percent threshold set to absent. Guys, this has to be 49%. I will say that I have talked to some districts who have changed this to some other number. I have seen districts put in 100% here. I have seen districts who have been told by some third-party vendors that they are using that it should not be 49%, and that is not accurate. I'm telling you, from the Alabama State Department of Education, this should be 49% in how we have this working for us. I've even been told that somebody in Power School Support, they got somebody in chat who didn't even know anything about this plugin that we have, told them that that didn't need to be there and that they needed to put the bridge back. If you start getting some crazy stuff like that from a Power School person, you let me know so that I can nip that in the bud quickly. No other choice. Check that box, put 49. For your default present code, that should stay blank. That's saying, hey, when I can't figure out anything else out of a code and I know it's supposed to be a present code, what do I need to use? I'll leave it blank. Now this one, I've got a TU, but I don't want to use a TU. Default tardy code. So let me see if I can explain this in when it actually uses this feature so you know how you need to mark it. I'm going to make a recommendation, but I want you to understand it. So when you're checking a student in or out, let's see if I'm going to pop this open. And let's go to that meeting attendance screen. Let's take this student who was marked absent. Let's pretend they just checked in, okay? So I'm going to open this up. So basically, two things happen on this. They check in, and this is at a high school, and I'll do this at an elementary school too as well to show you both sides. Let's say they check in 20 minutes late, okay? Because we know the majority of our stuff are kids who they just come in a few minutes late. So let's say that this is at 8:20 a.m. And it tells me student has missed only 18% of this period. I need a tardy in this period. Now, let me ask this question, and I really would love to see this in the chat. Oh, Morgan, you said you tried to set this for the school, but the code is not. Check it again, Morgan, because that would mean that the plugin is not enabled if you don't see that. Let me know. I want y'all to respond in chat if you don't mind. When you have kids who check in, for the majority of the time, do they bring some type of note that you consider it to be an excused tardy when they're being checked in, whether they bring a note or a parent walks them in? Or does the majority of them, when they bring something, it's not excused? Okay. Okay. So I want you to keep that in mind because you're going to need that answer in just a few minutes. So in this case, this is tardy. So let's say this person doesn't bring a note. They just walk in because it's some 12th graders just like, I just woke up late. It happens. In that case, I, as a district, would probably mark tardy unexcused. Is that what you would mark in that kind of situation? Senior just got up late and came in? When you actually have this and you link a tardy code in the meeting, then when it goes to calculate the daily, it is not going to look at this default code because you have stated a tardy code in the meeting minutes. So when you are entering in your check-in or check-out, if you use tardy unexcused or tardy excused in one of the periods, it will translate that over to the day. There's no conversion it has to make. It will use that. But what if a student checks in, let's see, first period ends at 9:46. So let's say they check in at 9:20. Okay, now I've got a different situation going on. Now the student has missed 75% of first period. Okay, so then that means they are absent in first period. But are they absent for the day? No. Okay. So let's say that they brought a note. Maybe they went to a dentist appointment. They scheduled an early dentist appointment, so I'm going to put doctor's excuse. When it does not see a tardy code as one of the periods inside of that check-in or check-out process, but it's not where the student has missed enough time to be absent where it needs to use that absence code, that is when it defaults to this preference. So that's why I asked that question. What do you see more of when they actually are gone enough to be absent in the day? Do you see them bringing, do you see them as excused reasons or unexcused reasons? Because what you want to do is set this to your majority. I personally saw a lot more excuses coming in on those. So for right now, I'm going to set this as tardy excused. And what that means, let me submit this page. Okay. That when I have this right here, this student is checking in at 9:20, going to be absent from first period, but they are present the rest of the day because they checked in. So this overall should show me a tardy. So when I hit save, it says, hey, they only missed 80 minutes. It was unexcused because remember the teacher put in the attendance. It's now going to tardy excused. So it went and read what I had in this preference for that answer right there because it didn't see a tardy code as one of the period codes. If that's not the code you need, if you're like, okay, well, I have majority is excused, but this one happens to be an unexcused, you can override it and then just go manually enter it. So right now, it doesn't know which one to look in. So I'll tell you that this is where our next iteration of this is going to be. So what I'm going to see if the developer can do now is, can they look at, let's go back here, the category of the code that is used and do a translation. Now y'all probably going, Stacey, what does that even mean? Okay, I want to show you. So we know that a tardy wasn't used there, but we know that it didn't go over 49%, so it shouldn't be absent. But I'm assuming that when y'all mark this, if they didn't bring in an excuse, you would have marked that unexcused absence, right? That's what I'm thinking. So those have a category that's attached to them. In the attendance setup, they know that DE is an excused absence code, and we know that UA is an unexcused absent code. We're pulling a rabbit out of our hat, but I'm going to see if Lorenzo can take and look at the category this absent code is associated with and use that to trigger whichever tardy code it uses. That way we don't have to have a default tardy like we do right now. We'll probably have to leave that in there just as like a fail safe. But if I can have it recognize that, hey, this was an excused absence code, so I know it should be tardy, I need to mark it as tardy excused. And that when I have a code that is unexcused, we can have it marked unexcused tardy in there. That way y'all don't have to do that manual change, which is what you would have to do right now. So there's still more iterations of this to refine that tardy process a little bit better. So right now, I will say we've gotten about 75% of all tardy codes locked in correctly. We got about 25 that you still have to manually manipulate if it does not fit what you choose as that preference. And guys, each school can choose something different. If like your elementary kids are always bringing a note in and you want to set the elementary schools to be tardy excused, but your high schoolers don't ever bring anything in, so you want to set those to tardy unexcused, you can differentiate that across the district. So have a conversation with your people who are taking these notes and ask them, do you get in more excused items or more unexcused on these check-ins and check-outs that end up being tardies? Because that's going to help you with that. Okay? So that is tardies. Patrick just asked, one of my clerks is having an issue printing a list of unexcused check-in, check-outs. Do you have any advice on printing this? Yes, Patrick, we're going to be redoing all of those attendance reports all together because I don't like the system report ones that they have built in because they do not help us at all. So we're scoping something out completely different for y'all. Because what we want to do is be able to give you a report that will list tardies that do not indicate anything from a check-in or check-out. That way y'all can see actual teacher tardies and school tardies separate from check-in and check-out tardies, because I know y'all look at those very differently. All right, now let's go through and do a check-in or check-out where I do have a TE and a TU, just so you can see it will use that code when you go in there. So let's take this one right here. And she's only got 2 days scheduled, but let's say that they check in. So if I clock in at 8:02, you know, right after the bell rings, yep, that's going to be tardy. Let's say it's unexcused, because I want to show you that even though I set my preference to TE, it is going to honor what code I put in here. So I'm going to save here. And then set this to present because they checked in. And when I save, you will see they only missed 2 minutes of the day. And that is a new daily code from unexcused absence to TU. So even though I had that tardy preference set to TE, because I used an actual tardy code in the meetings, it uses that code over there on the daily. So you don't have to think about those. And so I submit. And all of those get changed. And sure enough, if I come over here to my daily attendance page, you're now going to see I got a tardy on there. It's the one that I just wrote, because those earlier ones didn't get a tardy in that overall area. All right, let's go back to meeting. All right, it's submitted on that area, I should say. If let's say I do an add. I'm going to choose a student, pick Aubrey right here. Okay, she's got 3 classes. Let's say she does a check out. So let's say it's at the end of the day and I do a clock out at, let's see, her day ends at 1:44. So let's do it at 12:30 p.m. So it tells me that in this period, period 3, she is absent. Okay, so let's see what kind of, let's just say it's a parent note. So in this case, it's an excused. I hit save. It should, because I don't have anything in there indicating a tardy, even though it's going to be a tardy to the overall day, it should default to that tardy code that we set, which was TE. And sure enough, it does. So once I submit this, now, if for some reason it wasn't an excuse code, so in this case, parent excuse is an excuse code, but maybe it wasn't an excuse. It's going to default anyway. How would you go in and change it? So if I used unexcused absence on her, it's still going to come over here in daily. And list her as a TE because it had to use that default code. You can edit this and you can say, no, I need this to be a TU and hit save and correct it manually inside of there. So just know that if you do have that discrepancy, you can go in here and do this. So it's still using the original logic that we had in PowerSchool to begin with until we can get that next step of coding in here to read that. So like I said, about 75% of these are going to write automatically on the tardies. If we manually change a code when they check in because the check-in is different than our preference, will it not pull the preferred code when we run the daily attendance calculation? Yes, and that's one of the things that you kind of need to keep in mind when you do your checks on those to make sure that it doesn't do any of those swaps. You can override those and click them out of there, which is also, and I'm going to go through that, Allison, kind of a couple of run throughs of that recalculation. You don't want to keep reconciling the same days over and over again. You want to reconcile for a period of time, and then you want to set that aside and not go back to it, or else you're going to keep fighting those same ones that you know shouldn't be changed. And we're going to talk through how to look at changes to make sure should they be changed or should they not be changed. Ellen, at what date does the new attendance procedure start? There's an issue with a skipping code on a student, but it wants to give a TU for the daily. Didn't know. Okay, it doesn't backdate, Ellen. So everything that's changed happens now. But if you use a reconciliation, it applies the new procedures to old code so that you can check it. If the student checks in with the doctor's note, can we not code it as DE instead of TE? So Kimberly, it all depends on how much time was actually lost in the day. If they did not miss enough minutes to be absent in the day, if they didn't hit that over 49% threshold, then that's an overall tardy for the day, not doctor's note for the day. And you don't want to inadvertently count a kid all day absent if they shouldn't be, because that will badly affect your chronic absenteeism. So that's why we have that in there for you to look at. Now, if they miss enough time to be out for the whole day, then yes, you put that DE code inside of there and it will calculate that for you. So for example here, let's swap back to the meeting attendance. Let's add a student in. I'm gonna pick up Mickey. Okay, he doesn't have anything in here. So let's say he checks out at 11:07. This should be enough to constitute an overall day. So this is in second period. He's only missed 20 minutes of second period, so he's considered present, but because he's missed some, it's going to be tardy. So let's say he's going to the doctor. So second period is going to be tardy excused. But then for the rest of the periods that he know he's gone, he's going to be at the doctor. That might not be enough time. Let me back that up to 10 o'clock. 10:07. Okay, now he's absent here, so doctors, save. Okay, so if I do those doctors, because it showed me that he missed enough time in both with me changing that he's now absent in that period, he's absent in that period. When I save this, it's going to look at the overall day and say, okay, he did miss 217 out of his 344 minutes, which is 63% of the day. It's going to trigger that doctor's excuse code. But if it had not meshed that threshold, even if you had put doctor's notes over in there, it would have said, hey, the daily code still should be a tardy. So it's looking to see if it meets that 49% rule or not automatically. And I'm going to submit that. And I'm going to go back into Mickey and alter that to show you. So let's go to Mickey. So let's change this to where it, let's see, what's the latest in that day? Let's do 11:26. Okay, so let's say he gave me a doctor's note, so I'm going to put doctor's note in because I wasn't paying attention to the time. If I did that, because I can tell you this is not enough time to be absent, but because he brought me a note, I put in a note because that's just what I'm used to. When I hit save, it's going to recognize that, hey, in the overall day, they only missed 40%. So the daily code of doctor's note should not be there. It should be a tardy. Yes, they can be doctor's note for those periods, even though that first one is incorrect. The logic, and the thing is, I'm seeing people override this because they're going, no, it doesn't need to be tardy, it needs to be doctor. That's not the case. If this logic right here has that being below 49%, do not fight this. Because if you do, then that means you're causing extra chronic absenteeism in your district that you shouldn't be. If this is less than 49%, this code should be a TE or a TU. Or if it's 0, it should be a present code of some type. So hit submit. So that shows you that even if it's hard for you to understand as maybe a registrar entering this in that they brought me a note and I'm not supposed to always use the DE, that will calculate correctly for the daily for you. But we really need to get that refined, because if not enough time is missed in the day for this, or in the period for DE, so if I go back here, you know, right here it tells me they only missed 1 minute of this right here. It says a present code should be used. Well, if any minutes are missed, the only present code to use is a tardy code. In this case, you decide, is it tardy excused, tardy unexcused, and it should look correctly inside of here. So Kimberly, I hope that answered your question. Mary asked, why does Carmelo have 2 codes third period? Great question. If I go, there are 2 codes right there because, and only in rare situations do you have this happen, this student is double scheduled for third period, because he is taking a physical science class and maybe there's a virtual class that they're taking in there. That's probably not a very good case right there. Like I said, very rarely do you see this, but there are some situations where kids can be double booked. Now, don't be scheduling saying some kids sitting in an algebra class and a history class at the same time trying to get double credits, because that won't fly when Sean and them do their compliance monitoring on that. So be wary of that. But there are some situations where we have seen students are double booked inside of a day. So it captures both of those codes inside of there. Great question. All right, in the elementary school front office, am I supposed to be taking attendance or making changes on the daily side? All right, so let's, because we've run through a few examples at the secondary level, let's swap and kind of run these same situations at the elementary level so that you can see how that works. So I'm going to change to a primary school. And first thing I'm going to do is show you that I have the same, or should have the same, attendance preferences in here. So scroll to the bottom. Okay, you'll see I have the same thing. I've got daily code, 49%, and I'm choosing to default my code to be a TE. I recommend that you choose whichever one you see more. Remember, have that conversation. Do you see more excused or unexcused? So now, if I go to this, I don't think anybody's taking attendance here. Let's go check my meeting side, see if anybody's there. Nope. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a staff member's class and just post attendance for them real quick. So I know I have some students here that I play with. So I'm going to go in and post from the admin side. Now remember, anytime you post attendance from the admin side, it locks it over in that teacher portal and they cannot overwrite them. Okay, a lot of people kind of misinterpret that, but that's by design in this program, so that when you push check-ins and checkouts and you push ISS, OSS, things like that, that they can't overwrite those codes. So if you ever go in here and post attendance, like for a sub, for a teacher, anything like that, they will not be able to override it. The other teachers in the other classes after that student can go through, but not this one. All right, so let's say guess somebody's got a birthday this week. Submit. We're gonna mark 3 kids out. So if I go back, if I go to my attendance and my meeting, and I will say, yes, you want to trigger this. Majority of the time it's going to be from the meeting side. Okay, to be all honest, I find it easier doing it from the meeting side, let it write to the daily. But in these situations where your only period is this 1 day homeroom, so how many of you, this is what you do with your elementary schools? You set up 1 period and you run it all day. That's like the typical norm outside of there. It's really the same. So could you do it on the daily side and have it right to meeting? Yes, because we have it where it pushes backwards and forwards. To me, it just is easier to keep everything consistent, to work it from the meeting side and let it populate over to the daily side. So let's use some of these situations right here. So let's pretend these 3 students were marked absent, but here comes Jeffrey rocking on in 20 minutes late because they slept late. Okay, so we're going to perform a check-in. So if I click my clock, and let's do a clock in, and let's say they came in at 8:30 a.m. Now remember, this is constituting my whole day. This message down here is telling me about the entire day, whereas a while ago when I was in the high school, this message only referred to that one period. Well, my one period is my whole day right here. So it's saying, hey, this student has missed 11% of your defined homeroom period, which is your all day. You need to use a tardy code. So it's straight up telling you this needs to be a tardy for the day. Even if they say, hey, I was at the dentist, here's my doctor's excuse. That is not when you enter in a doctor. That is an absent code. If you want to denote, so I'm going to make this a tardy excuse, and if you want to note that they were at a doctor's appointment, that's what notes are for. I can type right. I'm going to hit save, but I do not code that as a DE because if I do, it's going to count him absent for the whole day, even though he only missed a certain percentage. It's what you're trying to get it to do, and you don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit save. Notice it takes him away from there because now he's in the tardy category inside of there. My little screen didn't pop up. Oh, something's going on. I got a configuration somewhere. Hang on. Let me make sure because I've been playing back and forth with this. Scheduling. Bell schedule. Edit. Here's the other thing I've seen. Sometimes bridges get left in. No, that one's all right. Hang on, guys. This happens sometimes. That's why we have to troubleshoot. I'm going to do my daily attendance calculation and see if that pulls that in on that student. Oh, I need that kid first. Actually, I want to flip it again and save it and see if it pulls it. There it goes. Okay, I don't know why I did not show that first time, so I'm going to write that down because that's what should have happened the first time. So it says, hey, they were marked unexcused absence. Now you have changed them to a tardy, and we are going to mark them a tardy for the day because they only missed 50 minutes of the day when they checked in. So that's 11%. Hit submit. Now, I want to show you that other scenario where I've seen people fight it, and it will try to correct it in the daily calculation. So let's say, again, this student checks in at 8:19. It's telling you that it's a tardy code, but the kid brought you a doctor's note. And so you just, because they gave you a doctor's note, you're trying to code it as doctor's excuse. Save, save. All right, now, here's where it's saying, hey, hang on, you didn't do something right. This kid only missed 39 minutes. They only missed 9% of the day. That should be a tardy code for the day, not, in this case, the doctor that you entered in or the overall unexcused absence that was first put in. So I'm going to hit submit. But that should key to you that you made a mistake on that meeting side because now you have a mismatch. You've got meeting saying that that student was a doctor's note, which would be absent for the day, and you've got the daily side for Jonathan. So let's go to the daily record. Saying that they are excused. See, that one says a tardy now. Those are the ones that you're going to have to make sure you are paying attention to because depending on where your FTE is pulling, if your FTE is pulling from meeting, it has the wrong code and you're counting this student absent as far as state attendance and chronic absenteeism, but yet on the daily side, you're showing that he's actually present for the day because he only missed a few minutes. The daily side's going to show that calculation based on that 49% rule. So I know a lot of people have started flipping their FTE settings to look at the daily records, since it's kind of got that fail safe to catch when these mistakes are still being made in front offices. So this should have been a tardy code because they only missed a few minutes of the day, not the overall day. And again, it says, yes, that's a match. There's nothing I need to do, and I can submit. And it doesn't matter if you're checking a student in or checking a student out at the elementary school. So let's see if I can get a student who has a schedule. Not all of them in this school does, so cancel. Even if, let's say, a check-in or check-out occurs at the end of the day, so let's say they check out, and we all know in elementary schools we have parents who love to check their students out with like 10, 15 minutes left to go because they don't want to sit in that car rider line. So if my day ends at 2:45, let's say they come in and check them out at 2:30. It's still telling you, okay, this student has only missed 15 minutes of the overall day. A present code is recommended, okay, because they were there for the whole day, but because they've missed part of the day, it should be one of your tardy codes. So depending on what you use as that reason, do you let that be excused or unexcused? Most of those are unexcused, and that is not an early dismissal code, y'all. That is a completely different use of a code. Make sure you read the attendance manual, because early dismissal is not for when parents come and get them 5 or 10 minutes early. That is when your superintendent has declared something's going on and you've got to shut down school early. So make sure you're not misusing that code. So in this case, I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to spin and say, okay, what should that tardy code? Okay, it did it again. I've got something going on in my pilot. Y'all, if y'all see this happening in yours as well, where it's not bringing up that box, please let me know, because I'm something's going on here that I got to get Lorenzo to look at. All right, so there's run through some elementary. Let me get back into my questions. Renita, if they check in with a doctor's note before 11:30, I code them as TE. If I code them as DE, it looks like the child was absent all day. Renita, are you talking about, and it would depend on if you're looking at a high school or middle school, and if you're talking about the period of or the entire day. And that's why I keep going back here and saying you've got to kind of look at that overall percent for the total minutes in the overall day of this student. So you've got to read those prompts and really follow them. We don't need to fight the prompts that PowerSchool gives us. Sharon, so what happens when we have a student homeschool or her teacher marks her absent daily? I guess you would have to define what you mean by their homeschool. Is this a homebound student? If it's a homebound student, there actually is an attendance code that you mark for them and code them for those days. Kathy, can you please repeat what you stated about ISS or AP codes? So the program, because those codes are present codes, when you code things such as, and let me swap back to the high school for a minute. Welcome back, everyone. Y'all know at the 1 hour mark that WebEx likes to kick me off and just give y'all a breather. So let's talk about the discipline codes inside of this. So when you are creating incidents, so I'm going to go in and mock up an incident real quick for Mickey. If it is one where you assign an ISS or an alternative placement, those are present codes for students. They don't get counted absent as far as state chronic absenteeism is concerned. Remember, with those codes, there's not any minutes taken off of the day because it's not a check-in or check-out, so it doesn't know what to look at. So we have hard-coded this, where if it sees AP or ISS in there, because you typically do those for the entire day, it's going to pull that as a daily code. And right now, there's the only daily codes that are going to pull over there. Any other present code you use, like field trip, school activity, things like that, are going to report to the daily side as a present code, which is fine. It's counting the same way as far as the state is concerned until we can go to that next level of like you choosing which code you want to use. OSS is pretty self-explanatory because it does know that that's an absence code and it will write that absence code over there. I'm going to create this to show you that it will still use those appropriately. I'm going to bare bones this discipline. So let's say it happened today, profanity, blah, 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 location on campus, prepared by me. If you could put any comments, all that kind of fun stuff. Look up mouse. Add Mickey as an offender. And then the behavior is profanity. Drag it over to them. And the action, let's give them in-school suspension. Let's start it tomorrow. Run it through Friday. Expected end date, actual end date. And that's all I'm going to put on there. Pull this over. Okay, that is one code that we have where I can write attendance. So I'm going to say, come over here and set this ISS range so it's hitting all of them, and I'm going to submit OK. It's not going to do the write until I press this overall submit incident bucket or button. So when I hit submit incident, it's going to process this and it's going to load and it's going to say, okay, for these 3 days that you just put in there, you know, right now they're coded as present because it's future dates and everybody starts out present until you flip them to something else saying, hey, you want me to go ahead and write that daily code as to ISS? And the answer to that is yes, I do. I want the daily code to match those meetings that I just pushed in there and I submit. So it'll work correctly for your ISS and for your AP because we read those from discipline. But if I come over here into attendance and let's go to meeting. Let's say that you've got 3 kids who are going to participate in a mathematics tournament or something today. So you want to mark them as a school activity or a field trip. I forget which one is supervised. Look at the definition of them. But let's say I'm going to mark 3 kids as a field trip. Let's see if I can find one that's got a good schedule. Okay, we'll work with this. Let's say that during this advanced kinesiology, they're going to be gone. Remember, if it's field trip, things like that, you don't perform a check-in and check-out. You just note it through the records what the code needs to be. So if I mark this as a field trip, or I'll just use school activity since it's right there, and I hit save, okay, notice, and this is one of the bugs that we're still working out, it doesn't show anything, but what it's doing is saying, hey, write this as a present code inside of there. Because that's what it is. It's not going to pick up those field trips, the school activities, all those other presence codes as those codes for the daily. It's going to write those as a actual overall present code. And when I do the recalculation, you'll see that that's there. Because we don't want those to be insinuated that that's what they did all day long for now. So Kathy, hopefully that answers your question. Kim, there's been confusion from my district whether we are supposed to put in TE or TU when they check in out to calculate the time correctly, like the example above, TE, TU. So TE and TU are going to calculate the exact same way. You just make that determination of whether you are calling that tardy excused or tardy unexcused. You get to decide which category that falls in. In all honesty, the way the state sees tardies, we see them the exact same way. There's no differentiation of them. Your biggest thing is when you're using absence codes and tardy codes, because one of them does negatively impact if they're incorrectly used as far as that DE code. Larissa, if the school nurse has sent a child home and has missed enough time of the day where it's an absence, what code should we use? You'll use the DE code, Larissa. That code was updated this summer to actually be a doctor's and nurse excuse. Is there Erica's absent. Is there a report I can run to find if I have any courses marked exclude? Yes, Erica, there is one in PSCB. If you look in the current scheduling year, there's one that's courses information that I might have that one. If not, I'll find the other one. Send that email to me offline and I'll figure out which one will be best for you on that one. But I believe there's one in PSCB. I love the current Unified Insights attendance reports. Is the current weekly attendance trend over the last 3 years report accurate for data? Yes, it should be. It's reading from the stuff we have had in Power School because we've now been in 3 years. Aaron, when my schools enter comments on the attendance entry, it shows on the meeting attendance history, which is what I expect. Is it possible to make those comments show on the daily history? Not unless you actually enter them on the daily record, Aaron, which is kind of unfortunate because I know that's probably where you want yours to come from. But wait on that report that we're going to be pulling out for you in enterprise reports because I think it might be exactly what you need that will not cause you to have to enter this somewhere else. Kimberly, I normally mark DE if a student checks in with a doctor's note for that block and mark the student present for the day. Kimberly, that shouldn't be an automatic. Just because they bring in a note does not mean it's to be marked DE. You really have to look at the percent of time that they miss, and in that box it tells you if it's a present code or an absent code. If it says use an absent code, then absolutely put the DE in there because that is an absent code. But if it tells you to use a tardy or a present code, then you should be putting the TE or TU inside of there. If it's a doctor's note, it would be a TE. And then the overall daily code would be that tardy code as well because they've missed some attendance in the day. Angel, what if they check in but also need to be marked for ISS? Then you would do that adjustments with the check-in. And so when you do that check-in code, so let's say right here, maybe the student was supposed to be in ISS but wasn't, and then they checked in but they had been marked absent. So if I needed to do this check-in and say, okay, they came in at 9:32, so that tells me in first period they're absent. Okay, so maybe they don't give a reason. I'm going to say unexcused. I'm going to hit save. But then here we know they're supposed to be ISS, so I'm going to use ISS. When I hit save, it's going to look and it knows that, hey, they only missed 20% of the day. So even though they were absent or tardy in that first period, they still are going to get that overall ISS code because it's coded. So if it sees that code, that it should mark that as the overall day. It's your present code. So instead of it doing a tardy, it's going to pull that ISS in for now with the way that logic is working. Oop, I lost my place. Should the FTE be set to meeting or daily as a district choice? It's a complete district choice, Erica. I will say that most people have flipped it to daily. The ones who are really using meeting still the most for it, or if you are a school that has a lot of remote enrollments. Because with remote enrollments, if you're not having communication between the schools, because you know that daily code does not automatically update from those remote enrolled classes, it will look across all the meeting periods to get that correct for you. So that's kind of what you need to keep in mind with that. All right, Danielle, you are just batted me up for my next point to show. So if you said this starts today and moving forward, how do we go back and check to reconcile for wrong I can't talk today, y'all, codes in cases such as DE and should be a present code? All right, so very good question. The catch-all, the fail-safe, the one thing that we put in there where you can say, hey, if you run this, you know, at the end of each week just to catch anything, or if you want to run it at the end of each day for it to look for mismatches. Or if you're like, okay, we've been taking it for the whole year, now I'm questioning some things, you can run it for the whole year starting from the first day of school until right now. Just be careful, you need to run it in small batches because to check that many attendance codes will bog down if you try to do the whole school at one time. So I recommend running grade levels. So inside, well, first we've got to go to the main screen. You have to have a student selection made first. So let me clear my list. So let's say I want to grab my 12th graders. Maybe I'll run it 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, run through here, or, you know, kindergarten 1, 2, 3, however you want to do it. I've got 300 kids selected. I want to check all of their attendance to see what we've done since the beginning of school to now is accurate, or are there anything that's saying, hey, is it meeting the logic based on the 49% rule? When you click attendance, if you're in the new UI, you see it down here under daily attendance calculation. If you're still in the old UI, when you click attendance, there are tabs across the top. You should have one that says functions. If you don't have the one that says functions, that means you've not been turned on security-wise to get that, so you'll need to talk with your district power school administrator. If you do have that functions one, you're going to see this at the bottom of the screen. Now, daily attendance calculation is not the same thing as this recalculate daily attendance minutes. That is not what we're going to do. I want daily attendance calculation. It's going to say take these 323 kids and check their daily code from today's date, from the first day of school to today's date. You can change this range to be whatever you want. Once you have checked from like beginning of school to now, I would not keep running that over and over again because you shouldn't be doing a lot of touching back to that. After that, you would say, okay, maybe I just want to check it for tomorrow and like keep up it in real time or check it once a week or something like that, because it is a lot of data for it to crunch. So I'm going to submit this, and let's look at what this screen does. It's going to list like anytime any attendance has been changed, touched, or whatever inside of here. If they match, there is nothing I need to do, nor do I need to look at it if it matches. This is where the little Easter egg is into play, where you have this H symbol. If I click this H symbol, it's going to hide anything that matches. That way I'm only looking at things that are overridable. So let's look at what I've got on my screen right here. First off, I notice I've got a lot of TUs that is trying to flip to a TE. This is probably where in the meeting side they've been absent, so it didn't know what tardy code to use, so it flipped a TE, and I went and manually changed it back to a TU. Somebody asked earlier, if we did that, wouldn't it try to catch us in the recalculation? And the answer is yes. If you don't want it flipped, then you're going to need to override these. And it might be a lot of them, because until we can get that next step of logic, I would say, no, I don't want to change them. Or if they do need to be changed, then you let it change them. If I come down here, I have made some changes with ISS and OSS code, so that's all legit. Right here is where I made that change a while ago. Check somebody out, and it's needing to flip that back to an ISS. These right here are all of these. So if I see that I have a lot of these where all it is trying to change my unexcused tardies to an excused tardy because it's trying to use the default, if that's all I have on my screen, which technically if you've been keeping up with it correctly, that is all you would have, I could say, oh, I don't need to do any of this at all, and I can just back out of it. As long as you don't hit that submit button, you've not actually made any changes whatsoever in here. So I could completely go out of this, go back to the main screen, and select my next group of kids. Let's choose 11th graders, because I've been doing a lot with 12th graders. Whoop, get rid of that. Let's go run this on 11th grade. So attendance and daily attendance calculation. And see what I get on 11th graders. So again, I'm going to hide my matches. All right, so here is some where it looks like I have some code discrepancies that I probably entered in at one point in time that now this recalculation is finding. So for example here, a previous daily code was an unexcused absence and now a new daily code of AA. So at some point, I went into this record on this day and changed unexcused absences to administratively approved because they were out all day long, but it never got triggered over into the daily side. This catches it for me. So when I hit submit, which I'm going to do on this, it will actually take that into consideration. This is an alternative placement. This was one of them that was kind of a bug fix in this. So previously it picked up alternative placement as a present code because it wasn't reading present codes correctly and given those categories. Now it's saying, hey, I see that you had an alternative placement code in the meeting, so I want the overall day to move from present to that actual more classified present code of alternative placement. Same thing here. You will probably see a lot of these nuns turned into TEs because in the way it was working previously, it wasn't catching tardies as check-ins and check-outs the right way. It was putting them as present over there, which I told y'all was fine. Let it go ahead and do it because we could fix them in this. You will want to accept all of those and run those through. Here's some where we must have backed out some attendance. Let's see if I can find some. Here's one where, okay, we had legal. Remember, legal is not one of them in my list that it knows to use as an overall present code. So it's saying, hey, let's change legal to present, but maybe you want the daily code to stay legal on that. If that's the case, you just say, nope, take that one out. I don't want that one changed. Just hit the override on any. I got a lot of TE. So you would have to go through and kind of look to see what do these need to be. Same thing on these. Here's where I've got kids where I marked them homebound, and it's trying to set that overall daily code to present. Don't want that. That's going to have to be in the second iteration where we can say fix that. So once we get past you cleaning up from the beginning of the year to now, you might have quite a bit of overrides this first time you pass through to get them clean. But after that, you shouldn't moving forward. And when you are ready and say, okay, I've got everything like I need it to be, I'm just going to go ahead and accept all of these, hit submit. It's going to go through and now clean up all of those codes for you. Because the biggest part of this is for it to go in and catch when you're putting in DEs instead of the TUs for that overall daily. I'm going through the list. I know you got a lot of questions on here. I'm going to try to get to all these. I think most of these we have said, if we have been using the wrong one, how do I find them and correct? This is what you're going to do that. So Erica, where would we look in the new UI for the FTE code setup as meeting or daily? So in the new UI, you're going to go to school, and under attendance, it's going to be this full-time equivalency. So if I look at the full-time equivalency for here, you'll see that I'm reading the daily record. So what this means is that at night, when the State Department pulls your attendance, we're only looking at one table, either daily or meeting, and you tell us which one of those tables to look at. So I've said I want the state to read my daily to be able to send those ones and zeros for state reporting. So that is where this setting is to make sure you understand which side you're sending to the state as far as for chronic absenteeism. Now, we are still seeing everything on the meeting side and the daily side, but that DAV value is what we use for chronic absenteeism is going to be calculated based on this setting right here. Attendance is driven by the code entered, not the percent. The SIS calculates the percent of time and advises us, but the code dictates the absence. Do I have that correct? Ultimately, yes, Bob. So if you try to fight it, it will do it the other way around. So you've got to be very careful on that, which is why even though when it's entered on that meeting side, we have the daily, this whole function in this daily calculation looks at the percentage to say, hey, based on this percentage, this is what your daily code should be, so that it does actually look at the percentage if you won't fight what it asks for in that. Christy, best practice at elementary, have homeroom with all day period preferences or meeting and daily with two-way bridge. Should those also have the plugin enabled, or is that a school by school preference? It will make it easier for you and for training purposes if you have it, if you swap to the plugin instead of using the back and forth bridge on it to keep it consistent. That way you can do these reconciliations as well to make sure they're not putting in bad codes based on the actual percentage in there. How are absences counted for 504 and IEP? Are students considered present or absent? If you're using that SP code, that is a present code. And in the data code manual, I'll bring up those absence reasons just to take a look at them. I believe that's the first one. You'll see that right here it says that 504 IEP SP code is a present code. So that does not count against you. Now, again, because that's a present code, make sure y'all are not checking them in and checking them out when you put that code in. So if you have a kid who leaves at 2 o'clock to go to a therapy session because it's part of their IEP, don't do a clock out on them. Just put that present code in there to say that they're missing that period or that part of the day for them. I know in elementary schools that kind of looks different because you're running that whole day in there, so it makes the overall day become that code. But again, it's not harming the way that you're looking at attendance at the state level for them, so it's not counting toward chronic absenteeism. Should OSS show now on daily and meeting sides so the teachers don't have to mark the student absence? Yes, Natasha, that should have been working this whole time. What code should a nurse use? That was this DE code. We talked about that. If a student checks in third period and is under 49%, they have a doctor's note. If they're under 49% for the overall day, that should be a tardy code. Looking at the individual period, if they're under 49% in the period, again, it should be a tardy code for that period. And then, let's see, checking in, your previous periods would need to be a doctor's note. So let's scope that one out for you. So let's go to attendance meeting. And let's grab this student instead. And I know they got ISS, but we're going to change it all to present and reset this. And I'm going to delete this. Okay, so let's mock this. Whoop, that all to present. All right, so in your situation, whoop, lost it. Where'd it go? Student checks in third period. All right, so my third period is from 11:27 to 1:44. So let's check them in at, let's see, you want to be 49%. Let's see what 10. 10. How close can I get it? Ha. Okay. So they're 40. Oh, you want 49%. There we go. And they have a doctor's note. Okay, so in this case, it tells me for mine, because of based on how my periods are, 49%, if they're at 49, it's going to tell you that it's a present, but mine is slightly over at 49.5. Let's do 35. Okay, 48.5. In this case, it tells me I need a tardy code for the period. Now I'm in period 2 and not period 3 because how mine are. But you need to read this. What does it tell you to do here? Is it telling you that that period is tardy or that period is absent? Because even if it's a doctor's note, if it says a tardy, you do not enter DE. If it says absent, you enter DE, but not if it says tardy. So I would be tardy excused here. But because they checked in, this period would get the doctor's note because they were absent in that period. So when I hit save, it's going to look at that overall day and say, all right, for the overall day, they only missed 34%. So they should have a tardy code for the overall day, not the doctor's note. And we would submit that. In Unified Insights, if a student has a 4 FD excused absences, why are they being pulled in chronic absenteeism? Y'all wait until we're going to go through and explain those because there's two types of chronic absenteeism. There's federal and there is state. So you're probably going to need, you just wait until we get into that training on that and that'll make those make sense. By the way, make sure that your 3 people have been identified for your district and register, because if you're a North Alabama district, y'all's training start next week. So please make sure North Alabama districts, you have registered for next week's training. If a student is sent home for, say, fighting, and we mark them UA for the rest of the day, should we code it different because the admin sent them home? Because now we have to ask them for notes to cover the absence when the report is ran. So you need to talk to administration about that, because if they're sending them home, is that an out of school suspension? Or is that an administrative, like if they're sending them home, but it's not part of the discipline saying that they're being suspended for that day, then you need to talk with administration as to why and look at those code reasons to see which one is most appropriately there. Going through, if they check in late and leave early, I mark them tardy when they come in late, but what should I code them when they leave early? All right, so let's go through an example where you might have a back and forth with a student. So let's do first a check-in late. So that would be that they were marked absent. Let's see, do I have a kid that's got a full? Okay, that's close enough. So let's reset this student back to present on everything. So let's pretend that this student came in late. So I'm going to do a clock in at, let's say they came in at 10 o'clock. Okay, so it tells me of that period right here, he's only missed 13%, so that's a tardy. So I want to change this to tardy, excused, unexcused, depending on if they brought you a note or not. So we hit save, and he's there for the rest of the day, and we save here. So this is Anthony. So it tells me, yep, he was previously marked absent by his teachers, but we've now checked him in, so now he's just tardy for the day. So Anthony's been rocking on in class, and now, of course, he's over here on my tardy screen. But now he has come in and says, oh, I'm leaving early. So let's say it's in third or fourth period, whichever one. Let's say it's fourth period, 1:44. It's 1:45, and he's decided to check out. So I'm going to come back to the clock, and I'm going to process a clock out at 1:45 p.m. All right, so it tells me that in my fourth period, he has missed the majority of the period. He needs to be absent for that period. So is he giving you a reason that he's checking in or out? Depending on if he does or does not, then that would mean you would choose the appropriate code. So let's say I'm getting no reason, so I mark it unexcused. So I do it based on those periods, and then when I save, let the computer do that hard work for you. Let it look across the whole day and say, okay, it says, even though he missed a little bit in the first part of the day and a little bit at the end part of the day, it's still not enough to be an overall absence because he's only missed 23% of the day. So the overall daily code is still going to say a tardy excused from that original one when we did the check-in. And so you would just submit. Kelly, will those remote enrollments ever write back to the base school? I honestly don't know that, Kelly. That is one thing that we're fighting to see because schools with those reading from the sections is making it very hard to. So it's not taken off the list yet, but I don't have an answer to that. Janice, if a student checks out at 1:23, how would I code them? So Janice, you need to look at the prompts when you do the check-in or check-out. It should be prompting you to either put in a tardy code, a present code, or an absent code, and you need to follow those prompts. So it would depend on your bell schedule, how many minutes are lost as to which way that goes. So I can't give you a hard, fast, and definite based on that time, but you would need to read those prompts like we've been doing in each one of these. Marla, we won't see the daily attendance calculation until we turn on the daily setup, correct? Yes, that is correct. You have to have this set up for that screen to show. You have to enable it. Sandra, I submitted the 11th grade, but it showed no data. Did you have the 11th grade students selected, Sandra? And it could be that there's been no attendance changes made on them for it to not show anything. So one of the two things would be that. Oh, excuse me, 1 second. Kimberly, are you saying as long as the student brings in an excuse, it'll be marked as excuse TE? We have 5 parent note excuse rule that the students can use, and after the 5th, they have to have a doctor's note. So that's all based on your policy. If you have policies that say they can only use so many, then you need to follow that. But keep in mind, bringing in an excuse doesn't mean it's always going to be marked as a TE. It depends on how much time they lost inside of there. Now, I know districts have to make up the decision. Well, if it's a tardy, but they brought a note, are we counting that toward one of their parent notes? That is something y'all need to have a district conversation about that policy. Are you only applying that to absences? Or are you making it count toward also when they're tardy? Y'all have to make that decision based on your policy. So if y'all have not had that conversation in your districts, highly recommend having that one. Allison, on a slow day, we have about 125 check-in, check-outs. On a busy day, like last Friday, we had 264. That's a lot of manual management with the new interface feature. We are mixed back of TU. Since this is going to be an update that can differentiate between the tardy codes, can we let that take care of the issues whenever it becomes available? I mean, you can, Allison, but here's the thing. Even with what it's doing now, it's still taking off some of that work for you. So if you're saying you don't want this turned on and do that update, then you have no choice but to do it manually on both sides on everything. So I'm not sure why you would not want to let it fix for you what you have to do now. That kind of doesn't make any sense. Carla, you've already gone over this in a head step way. How do we update all attendance to know what has calculated correctly since we started the year without the attendance update? So, Carla, when you rewatch this, because the recording will come out, it's using that daily attendance calculation tool. So just watch back through that, and you can go back through those steps. Robbie, any word on the multiple check-in, check-out? No, until we get these codings, that daily attendance code calculation 100%, with each of our little things, that will be the next step inside of this. So yes, we are still have it in our queue to go through those mass check-ins and check-out functions. Eric, can we share this WebEx with our attendance registrar personnel? Absolutely, yes. And in fact, any of y'all who do not have, and I'm in my editorial view because I just updated some stuff, I would also say make sure that everybody who does anything with attendance in your district has this link as well, because it's where we post all of our videos, all of our documents. Like I'm doing these little 5-minute videos to show you how do you go in and recode a student once they bring in a note the next day? How do you take single day attendance as a teacher? How do you perform a check-in, a check-out, things such as that, so that you can give these videos to them to train with. Oh, and let's see, I lost my place by doing that. Jill, is it better to have FTE on meeting or daily? It's honestly up to you, Jill, but I will say daily is probably the easier because you do have the reconciliation to make sure the coding is correct. But a lot of districts who have remote enrollments need to use meeting so that it picks up the attendance in both of those schools to configure the overall day. Lisa, on our attendance recording methods, we have checked meeting and daily. Our FTE is set to daily. Our attendance is being captured properly for reporting. Yes, Lisa, that sounds 100% great. Jill, if we change it to daily, is there anything else that has to be marked or checked, but yet still clocking in and out on meeting side? No. All that does is say how the ones and zeros is recalculated for that student. So Wendy, it is going to be a requirement for this to be used across the state. So I would not advise disabling the plugin because this is the fail safe where we still see incorrect attendance being entered across the state. Oh, okay, Allison, send me that email and we'll see if we can clarify. On the old interface, am I calculating daily attendance? Yes, LaCora, on the old interface, when you go to attendance in that top left-hand corner and it has all of those different tabs on that page, you have one that says reports, meeting, daily, consecutive absences, and then there's a last one that says functions. If you have access to the functions tab, it'll be listed on there. Okay, whew. I think I have made it through all of the chat questions. All right, so anything last minute that we need to get in chat as part of the recording? If not, I'll go ahead and turn the recording off so it can render, and then I'll make it where y'all can unmute if y'all need, if we want to have open conversations on anything that didn't get clarified. But I think we've shown the daily attendance calculation. We explained the differences. We went through different check-ins, check-outs, to kind of show you what to expect inside of there. Tiffany, if we change to daily, do we need to select code today, percent today, or time today? We are percent today attendance conversion because we're on percentage based. Perfect. All right, guys, I'm going to stop the recording. That way